I thought I'd better start by starting off with some definitions of what we're talking about. Have I got a clicker somewhere, or no? Should I just wave? Well, yeah, that's probably the easiest way. Okay, so this is one of the many definitions that we have of mentoring. I like this one because it's not formal. It's a helping relationship. It's based on an exchange, so it's a two-way thing. Mentors help somebody less experienced. We're not talking about somebody more senior or somebody more junior. It's about gaining confidence, clearer purpose, insight, and this wonderful word, wisdom. It's one of those words we don't use enough. And I'm not sure what the Danish equivalent of wisdom is, but wisdom is a word you hardly ever see used. And yet it's one of the most fundamental things. It's what people need to be mature, to survive in the modern world, in any world. And in developmental mentoring, the mentor too is changed by the relationship. Mentor's a two-way relationship. Now, hopefully, there's no surprise to any of you in this. What might be helpful, however, is if we move to the next slide, and just put all the bits up, I think. Just a very quick history lesson, because I don't want to spend all the time talking about this. But if you go back to the early 1980s, when the first structured, planned mentoring took place, it took place in the United States. A bunch of organisations tried to structure what they were already doing, which was basically about somebody very senior adopting somebody else who reminded them of themselves 20 years before. And saying, right, I'm going to make sure you don't make the mistakes I made, and I'm going to use my power and my authority, my influence, to do things for you. And then we brought this idea to Europe, and it didn't work. And it didn't work because people in Europe had a much greater idea of, well, no, we want you to do things for yourself. We want to help you manage your own career, manage your own personal development. It's interesting, the definition of mentoring, when you look in the early definitions from the United States, all about overseeing the career of a young man. Very interesting language, isn't it? And there's a contract here. The contract is, I'm going to help you with your career, and maybe you'll get some personal development out of it. And what we have in Europe is something we now call developmental mentoring, where the contract is very much about, I'm going to help you with your personal development, I'm going to help you to grow, I'm going to help you with the quality of your thinking, and maybe you'll get some career benefit out of it. But it's a different contract, isn't it? Most people do their reflective thinking in the bath, walking the dog, jogging, doing the ironing, driving home, anywhere but at work. Nobody does any thinking at work. Not realistically. But this process that we're working here is a natural process we do individually on our own. But when we have a mentor with us, we have somebody who can help us work through this process faster, more efficiently, from a much wider range of perspectives than we would on our own. And that's one of the ways that we describe. It's about helping somebody, the quality of the thinking, taking them through this thinking curve. So how does this apply when we're talking about programs? So one of the ways that's coming up now that's really important in terms of program design is how much of the mentoring is delivered face-to-face and how much of the mentoring is delivered through other media. Now, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, or slightly more perhaps, could email mentoring work? Is it good enough? My answer would have been, of course not. You've got to be able to see the person. You've got to see the fear in their eyes when they talk about the problems they've got. But actually, based upon the research that's now beginning to accumulate, based upon doing it and experimenting with it, I have to say it's not as simple as that. That face-to-face mentoring and email mentoring actually are both very powerful mechanisms for achieving slightly different things in slightly different ways. One of the benefits, and these are just some of the benefits, of e-mentoring. If you have to wait for face-to-face meetings, you can't respond immediately to some of these issues. If you, when you've got in a face-to-face meeting, sometimes you're in the flow, you've got all this enthusiasm, you're talking away, and there's very little reflective space very often. It takes a very experienced mentor to really make sure there's a real use of silence. There's a lot of dead space while people think. So you actually build this in within e-mentoring. People can think for themselves. You ask them a question, and they've got time to respond. One of my e-mentees, basically, before she would ever contact me with a problem or an issue, and roughly once a month, she would take a chair, put it in front of her, put a pillow on it, and imagine that I was the pillow. And she was, and then she would have a conversation with the pillow. And then then having had that conversation, she'd do her email to me, and then she would tell me others, you always ask me questions, the pillow didn't. And this is a great way, it's encouraged reflection. The quality of the response, because you've got this thinking time, very often tends to be much, much better. And I mean, I've covered the next one there. But you've got a record, so you can go back and say, isn't it interesting how many times you use this phrase? Whereas if you're doing this just face-to-face, you tend not to notice those auditory clues. You can actually be highly precise. You can pull things out specifically. And you can operate, you can make it shorter, so it's not going to be an hour or 2 hours once every month or whatever, or once every few weeks. You can actually have a lot more interactions at a much shorter duration. So what we're increasingly coming around to is a view that programs can be multimedia, mixed media if you like, that you can have a lot of different forms of communication, including texting, for example. We've actually got case studies of mentoring relationships that are conducted entirely by text. As you can imagine, these are for teenage youngsters. But this is fine. Why not? If it works for them, and if that's the only way that they can communicate, I mean, let's face it. I mean, this is not the teenager week, but if you notice that most teenagers can only communicate in text and grunts, and so there's something that if the media works for them, then we need to use lots of different media. If we take all this into mentoring programs, we know that mentoring programs, that ISMPE compliant, that's the international standards for mentoring programs of employment, compliant programs, always deliver significant value, particularly in terms of retention, for example. They always have at least a third greater retention amongst the mentees than amongst any control group that you might have. Having a dedicated coordinator, somebody who's responsible for making it all work, who troubleshoots, who promotes it, who's the shoulder to cry on for the mentors when everything isn't going right. This is an important part of the whole process. The training of both mentors and mentees, we know statistically that if you only train the mentor, it's not going to be anywhere near as effective. I'm not going to steal Maureen's thunder because Maureen's going to talk about dancing, I can see, but we talk about it as strictly come mentoring. If you've seen this, there's a series in the UK called Strictly Come Dancing, and it's all about it, it's all about if you cannot do a tango if only one person knows the steps. And this is what and in mentoring, that's exactly the same thing. Both people have got to understand the steps, what their role and how they do them. We found in the matching that you need to match against values, not just against utilitarian values, like different types of experience. If you match on the values basis, then you've got a real basis for building rapport. Okay. You need to measure, obviously, and Kirsty's going to talk about that, so I won't steal her thunder either. But you constantly have a cycle whereby you're improving the process. We find too that if you get a critical mass of mentors who are trained, mentors and mentees who've been trained in formal coaching and mentoring, you very quickly find informal mentoring happens. And we're seeing this both inside organisations and inside communities. Having the emotional intelligence to empathise with the other person. The ability to manage the relationship, and help the other person articulate what their goal is, what they want to achieve from the relationship. I'll say something about goals a bit more about goals later. Being committed to their own learning and interested in developing other people. Those two things, which some organisations are now using just those two criteria to select their talent pool. If you can't pass that test, you're not talent. Which is interesting. The one thing that I think I'd just like to leave you with is the idea that integrated mentoring is something that we are beginning to see. It's still embryonic, but my vision is that people will go from infancy, where they go to their most junior school, and they become a mentee. And there's an older child who becomes their mentor. That they work through all the way in all the transitions they make through into the next level of school. If they're being bullied for one reason or another, children who are obese get bullied very, very frequently. We know from research that if they have an older child who adopts them from a class 2 or 3 above, the bullying is greatly reduced, and their own sense of self-efficacy and self-esteem grows. When they go to university, we know there are programs for black students going to university which are highly effective. all the way through to people coming out of prison, being a mum for the first time, being a single mum for the first time, even more, all the way into death. There are mentoring programs for people who are dying, basically. We can be mentor and mentee throughout the whole of our lives. I think I would strongly advise all of you to think of yourself as mentor and mentee all the way through. Thank you.